By the time summer ended, my entire family was bankrupt. My parents lost the house they once bragged about at every neighborhood barbecue. My brother was jobless. His name dragged through our community and even his old workplace. And my parents' so-called friends stopped returning their calls. The humiliation wasn't just private, it was public. Total. And irreversible. All of this happened because I finally decided to stop being the responsible one. The one who silently held everything together. I'm Stephanie. I'm 32 years old. And I'm the vice president of marketing at a Fortune 500 company in Boston. If you ask anyone on the outside, they'd say I'm lucky that I was born gifted. That I must have had every door opened for me. But the truth is, I built everything myself. Brick by brick. While my family did everything possible to take it apart behind my back, I used to believe that betrayal was just a fact of life, something you learn to get over. That's what people tell you. Right, keep your head down. Be grateful. Forgive and move on. But nothing. Not even years of therapy. I could prepare me for what my family had planned. What they didn't know was, I had receipts. Not just a few text messages or angry emails, but hard proof. Pages and pages of bank statements, payment apps, and even voice recordings. While they spent years underestimating me, they never once imagined what would happen if I finally fought back. Let me ask you something before I go on. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family, like no matter what you achieve, you're just the backup plan, the afterthought? The one who's only noticed when there's a crisis or a bill to pay? If that's you, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Because what happened next isn't just my story, it's the story of anyone who's ever felt used, ignored, or betrayed by the people who should have protected them. I've always been the one who stepped up. I was the kid who took care of everything, arranging my own ride to school, applying for scholarships, working 2 jobs in college while my parents emptied their savings to cover my brother Brad's endless fresh starts. While he bounced from college to college, racked up credit card debt, and switched majors like he was shopping for shoes, I learned to depend on myself. My first paycheck came at 22. And I remember my mom's voice, honey. We just need a little help with the mortgage. Just until Brad finishes school. Of course, Brad never did finish school. But that's another story. By the time I was 24, I was still paying now not just the mortgage, but the car note, the insurance, even little emergencies that always seemed to happen right after Brad's latest failure. My dad would always remind me, that's what families do. We help each other, but helping never seemed to be a two-way street. Here's the thing. I live in Boston. In a penthouse I earned myself, with a career that's taken over a decade to build. Every raise, every promotion. I celebrated alone while my family planned parties for Brad's smallest achievements. When Brad failed out of his MBA program for the second time, my parents blamed the professors. When he got fired from his 3rd job in less than 2 years, they blamed the boss. When I landed a 6-figure promotion, my mom's only response was, "Don't you think you're working a little too much?" But I kept giving. I kept showing up. I was paying my parents' mortgage over $4,000 a month. For more than 3 years, I paid the down payment on my mom's white Range Rover. And even picked up the tab when Brad went on a business trip that ended up being a weekend in Vegas. Every time I questioned it, I got the same response: family comes first. Translation: Stephanie Pace. Everyone else plays. 2 years ago, I started noticing little things that didn't add up. A Venmo request from my mom for groceries. But she was on vacation in the Hamptons. My dad calling about a short-term loan that never got repaid. A comment in a group chat about how lucky Brad was to have a sister like me. And I'll be honest, I wanted to believe it was just me overthinking. I wanted to believe that, eventually, they'd see me for who I really was. But that's not how these stories end, at least not for people like us. Looking back now, the signs were always there. All I needed to do was open my eyes. And that's where my story really begins. Once you see the pattern, it's like the whole picture sharpens into focus. For me, that pattern started the moment I became the reliable one in my family. Growing up, I was the fixer, the one who filled the gaps, did the chores no one else wanted, made sure every light bill got paid even if it meant giving up my own little wants. My parents loved to brag to the world about Brad's potential. He was the golden child, the prodigy in their eyes, the one whose every mistake was just a stepping stone to greatness. If he failed a test, the teacher was unfair. If he crashed the family car, it was a learning experience. If he blew through his allowance in one weekend, my mom just shook her head and handed him her credit card. By the time I was 16, I was already working part-time, saving up for college because it was clear that every dollar in our house flowed toward Brad. It wasn't that I expected a handout, I just wanted what every kid wants, some acknowledgement. Maybe a little fairness. Instead, I got lectures about how girls don't need to worry about money and your brother is under so much pressure. So, I became the girl who never asked for help. When I turned 18 and moved to Boston for college, the message was the same. I won scholarships. I juggled 2 jobs at a time, sometimes 3, just to make rent and tuition. Brad, on the other hand, went off to business school with a brand new car, a monthly allowance, and all his tuition paid up front. When he dropped out the first time, my parents blamed the school, said it wasn't challenging enough. I quietly reapplied for more scholarships, skipped meals, and doubled my hours at the campus bookstore. Looking back now, those years were just the start. The sacrifices became second nature. After graduation, I moved into a cramped apartment downtown and started my first job in marketing. I made $35,000 a year. And within months, my mom was calling to ask for a little help with the mortgage just until Brad landed on his feet. Of course, Brad never did land on his feet. He moved back in, spent his days networking, and his nights racking up bills at bars I'd never even heard of. At first, I believed my parents. This is just a rough patch. They'd say, "You're so successful. Steph, you're the only one who can help." So I sent what I could, $300 here, $600 there. Soon, it became regular. $4,000 every month for the mortgage. A few hundred more for Brad's credit card. Another $1,000 for my parents' car insurance. I picked up the down payment on my mom's white Range Rover, $40,000. Gone in a single wire transfer. While I quietly chipped away at my student loans and skipped vacations to save money, Brad and my parents went to the Hamptons every summer. My social media was full of their smiling faces at expensive restaurants, private beaches, and designer boutique. When I'd ask about joining, my mom would say, "Oh honey, you're always working. We figured you wouldn't want to come." The truth was, they never even asked. The family dynamic was written in stone. Brad was the dreamer, I was the doer. He got praise. I got requests for money. He got parties. I got polite applause. I remember one birthday. My parents threw him a surprise party for graduating, except he hadn't actually graduated. He'd dropped out again. But they wanted to keep his spirits up. They booked a rooftop bar for 25 people. When my promotion came a month later, my mom sent me a card that just said, "Don't forget to call Grandma." It got to the point where even my friends noticed. My best friend Ava once joked, "Your family treats you like their bank." I laughed it off. But deep down, I knew she was right. I can't tell you how many times I rationalized it. Families go through hard times. Brad just needs a little more support. One day, they'll appreciate me. But the truth was, no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. The more I succeeded, the more they took for granted. Every year, the numbers crept higher. In 1 year alone, I sent over $50,000 in payments, rent, car, credit cards, insurance, even a surprise vacation for my parents' anniversary that I wasn't even invited to. I kept spreadsheets, partly out of habit and partly because I needed proof for my own sanity. If you're wondering why I didn't just stop, well, that's the hardest part. When it's your own family, the guilt is heavy. Every time I hesitated, my parents would guilt trip me. You know how much Brad needs this. Your father's so stressed. Don't make things harder. We're so proud of you, Stefania. But remember, family comes first. Looking back now, it's almost funny in a twisted way. They trained me to think that love meant sacrifice, and sacrifice meant silence. That the right thing to do was to keep giving, keep smiling, keep swallowing every feeling that said, "This isn't fair." But all that sacrifice wasn't just about money. It was time. It was my self-worth. It was missing out on friendships, relationships, even little things like weekends away. Because someone always needed something more important than my happiness. And every step of the way, Brad played his role to perfection. The charming screw-up, the comeback kid. He'd flash that grin at family gatherings, toss his arm around me, and say, "I couldn't do any of this without Steph." Everyone would clap. My mom would beam. My dad would nod and say, "You see, Stefania, that's what family is all about." But I was the only one who actually knew what that meant. All of this, every sacrifice, every favor, every skipped vacation and late-night transfer was leading up to something bigger. I just didn't know it yet. Sometimes, the truth sneaks up on you in the most ordinary moments. For me, it started with a bank alert, one rainy Tuesday. My phone buzzed as I left the office. And there it was, a flagged transfer for $8,000 sent to a student loan company I didn't even recognize. At first, I thought it was a glitch. I called my mom right away, half worried, half annoyed. She answered on the second ring, voice syrupy sweet. "Oh, honey, I'll look into it. Probably just a mix-up with the joint account. Don't stress. I'll fix it," she said. Then changed the subject before I could press further. I wanted to believe her, but my gut said otherwise. So that night, I logged into my bank accounts. Page after page, month after month. I saw money leaving my accounts, some I remembered. Most I didn't. There were Venmo payments to my mom labeled Groceries on the same week she posted pictures from a spa in Nantucket. There were Zelle transfers for Brad's rent months after he said he'd finally landed a job. I scrolled through the records, heart thumping as the numbers added up. What really pushed me over the edge, though, was social media. Brad was never shy about showing off. On Instagram, he posted a photo at a fancy downtown restaurant captioned "Debt-free at last" with a big grin and a glass of champagne. The comments rolled in, "So proud of you, you deserve it," but I knew exactly whose money had wiped out his loans. That was my breaking point. Suddenly, every little inconsistency came back in sharp detail. There was the birthday party last spring, where Brad's friends toasted him for buying a new car when I was the one making payments on the Range Rover. There was the family trip to the Hamptons that I only found out about from Instagram stories. My parents never invited me, never even mentioned it. When I asked, my mom just said, "Oh, honey, you're always so busy with work. We didn't want to bother you." I wanted to scream. All that time, I'd believed my family when they said it was just a temporary rough patch. I believed I was helping. But now, I started digging for answers. Every 60 seconds, I found another breadcrumb. A group chat where my parents joked about Stephanie's bottomless pockets. An email from my dad. Months back, promising to repay a $7,000 loan money I never saw again. A Venmo request for $1,200 for groceries that went to a resort in Florida. Even a voice memo from my mom, "Don't tell Brad, but we might need a little more for the mortgage this month. He's under a lot of pressure." Looking at my spreadsheets, I realized that in the last 2 years alone, I had sent over $110,000. Every bit of it had vanished into my family's lifestyle. While they treated me like the supporting actress in my own life, the worst part, my so-called support system, was part of it. 2. Aunt Ava, who I'd always trusted, shrugged it off when I told her. "Steph, that's just how families are. Don't take it so personally." Even my best friend, at first, told me to just set firmer boundaries, as if I hadn't tried 100 times already. But I was done making excuses. I was tired of pretending everything was fine. That night, I started printing documents, bank statements, Venmo receipts, every email, every group chat screenshot. I made copies. I color-coded transfers. I wrote out a timeline of every payment. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the truth. I confronted my dad first. I remember his face, the way he looked everywhere but at me as I spread the records across the kitchen table. "You're the successful one," he said. "You'll be fine. Brad just needs more time." No apology. No remorse. Just the same tired line I'd heard my whole life. Suddenly, the weight of all those years, all those silent sacrifices, crashed down on me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't selfish. I wasn't the problem. They were. From that moment on, I stopped asking for their approval. I stopped pretending I didn't know the truth. Because if they could justify using me, lying to me, and erasing me from their real family moments, then I could finally do what needed to be done. And with every piece of evidence I collected, my resolve got stronger. The betrayal was bigger than I thought. And it was time to face it head on. Sometimes the moment you wake up isn't loud. It doesn't come with yelling or slammed doors. For me, it happened in complete silence. At my kitchen table late one night, surrounded by piles of paper and glowing screens, in front of me sat every piece of proof I'd ever need: bank records, Venmo logs, teller receipts, printed screenshots of group chats, and a spreadsheet that showed in black and white just how much I had given. More than $210,000. Gone in less than 3 years. I thought about every missed vacation, every weekend spent working overtime, every date I canceled because my parents needed a quick favor. I remembered the way my mom beamed at Brad's parties and how my own birthday was just an afterthought. The deeper I looked, the clearer it all became. This wasn't a string of accidents. It was a system, a machine that ran on my effort, my silence, and my guilt. The surface betrayal was obvious. My parents and Brad had used my success to fund their lifestyle, all while keeping me in the shadows. But the real shock came as I followed the trail backward. Every family milestone, every celebration, was just another excuse to ask for more. When Brad posted about being debt-free, it was my money that had wiped his slate clean. When my parents upgraded their kitchen, it was my savings that covered the bill. When they flew first class to the Hamptons, it was because I'd wired over $10,000 without knowing it. It hit me all at once. This wasn't just about money. It was about erasing me from the family story while using my hard work as the foundation for Brad's spotlight. My mom would stand in a room full of people and toast Brad for his potential, her smile wide and practiced. My dad would pat me on the shoulder and say, We're just so proud of Brad. He's got real drive. Not a word about the daughter who made it all possible. That night, sitting in the blue glow of my laptop, I realized I was done being quiet. The lies had built up, layer by layer, until the truth was almost impossible to miss. I could see the pattern in every transaction, every party, every carefully crafted excuse. For years, they'd told me that family means sacrifice. But what they really meant was that family means Stephanie sacrifices. As I reviewed the records, details jumped out at me that I'd ignored before. There was a Venmo payment labeled Brad's graduation dinner, even though he hadn't actually graduated. There was a Zelle transfer marked medical emergency that lined up with a week-long golf trip. My mom's voice echoed in my head, "Don't mention this to Brad. He's so sensitive about money. All these secrets. All these half-truths. Designed to keep me compliant." My senses sharpened. Almost painfully, I remembered every time my family excluded me from a trip or a dinner. I could smell the restaurant kitchens I never got to enjoy. I could see the expensive cars parked outside their house. I could hear the laughter from parties I wasn't invited to. The sky outside was still that dull city gray. But inside, I was starting to see clearly for the first time. And it wasn't just about what they'd done, it was how long it had been planned. The more I connected the dots, the more I saw the system at work. Every family event was an opportunity. Every phone call a setup. Even the moments when I felt closest to them were just pauses between asks. It felt overwhelming, almost like I couldn't breathe. But under all that hurt, something new was growing, a sense of purpose. If I had the strength to carry my family for this long, then I had the strength to stand up for myself. So I made a decision. I was done hiding. I would take every bit of evidence, every proof of their betrayal, and make sure there was no way to deny it. For the first time, I felt calm, not angry, not disparity, but clear and steady. This wasn't going to be an emotional outburst. It was going to be a reckoning. I gathered all the documents, organized them into folders, and started planning my next move. The truth was finally out in the open. At least for me. But soon, my family and everyone who ever thought I was just the backup was about to see the full story. With no room left to hide. Once I made the decision to stop playing along, everything shifted. I realized that getting angry wouldn't change the past. Instead, I chose something far more powerful. I got organized. The next morning, I called my friend Noah, a forensic accountant I trusted with my life. I told him everything. From the first mortgage payment to the latest Venmo transfers. We spent an entire weekend combing through every statement, every text, every group chat. By Sunday night, Noah had created a 27-page report with charts, timelines, and color-coded highlights. It wasn't just a stack of paperwork. It was a blueprint for justice. With evidence in hand, I booked a meeting with Miss Price, my attorney. She took one look at the report and raised an eyebrow. "Stefania, you realize this isn't just family drama anymore. This is financial fraud. There are laws in Massachusetts for this: identity theft, elder abuse statutes, and more." Hearing her say those words made it real. For the first time, someone saw my story for what it truly was, not a family squabble. But systématique exploitation. We started building my case. Miss Price walked me through every step. She helped me gather more proof, downloaded every Zelle and Venmo record. Each transaction spelled out, saved every email my mom sent with urgent in the subject line. Compiled voice recordings of calls where my dad asked for loans and never mentioned payback. Saved screenshots of group chats where Brad joked, "Steph's got it covered." As always, with Miss Price guiding me. I didn't just collect evidence, I prepared it for maximum impact. She drafted formal demand letters addressed to my parents and Brad, outlining exactly how much they owed and the legal consequences if they refused to repay. But I didn't want this to be swept under the rug in a private meeting. I needed my family and everyone who ever enabled them to see the truth in broad daylight. So, I set up a family intervention dinner. This wasn't your usual heart-to-heart. I reserved a private dining room at the same luxury hotel where my parents had once hosted a gala for Brad's graduation. I made sure to invite everyone: aunts, uncles, cousins, even a few family friends and some of my own colleagues, people who'd heard rumors, but never the truth. Before the dinner, I CC'd everyone on an email attaching the executive summary of the accountant's report. I included HR at my mother's country club and the office manager at Brad's workplace. My subject line was "Direct Family Financial Matter, Full Transparency Required." On the night of the dinner, I walked in carrying nothing but a laptop and a thick blue folder. My hands were steady. My voice was clear. This time, I wasn't there to be the peacekeeper. I was there to reclaim my power. After everyone had taken their seats, my dad tried to start his usual speech about family sticking together. I let him talk for 30 seconds, then stood up and connected my laptop to the projector. What followed was not a meltdown. It was a masterclass in calm control. Slide by slide, I laid out every transfer. $4,000 a month for more than 3 years. For the mortgage, $40,000 for my mom's Range Rover, countless payments for Brad's credit cards, totaling over $60,000. Nearly $12,000 labeled as medical emergencies that were actually vacations. Every transaction had a date, a screenshot, and a note explaining where the money went. I played voice memos of my mom asking for a little more help and group chat snippets where Brad laughed about my bottomless pockets. The room was silent except for the gentle hum of the projector. Then Miss Price joined by Zoom. She spoke directly and professionally, effective immediately. All support from Stephanie has ended. Any attempt to access her funds or accounts will result in legal action. Repayment is now a formal demand. Further contact should go through my office. For the first time in my life, I watched my family realize that I was not backing down. My parents' friends shifted in their seats. Brad looked like he wanted to disappear. The professional contacts and family friends saw everything. No more secrets. No more excuses. After years of silent sacrifices, I finally saw the power shift. I wasn't the family ATM anymore. I was the one setting the terms. As I packed up my laptop and documents, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: relief. No more emotional outbursts. No more begging for understanding. Just clear boundaries, public truth, and the beginning of real consequences. The moment the last slide faded from the screen, the air in the room felt heavier than ever. I didn't shout. I didn't shed a tear. I simply looked at each person sitting at that table, the people who had called me family, and let the silence do the work. In that pause, the power I'd lost for so many years finally settled back into my hands. The fallout was fast and, honestly, brutal. My mom tried to save face first, pushing back her chair and declaring, "We were just trying to help Brad. That's what families do." She looked around for support, but nobody met her eyes. My dad tried to steer the conversation, saying I'd blown things out of proportion. That money isn't everything, but it was clear the truth had landed. The more they talked, the more desperate they sounded. Brad said nothing. He stared down at the table, his cheeks burning red. Unable to look at anyone, I noticed a few family friends quietly gathering their things, mumbling excuses about early mornings. My aunt and uncle, who'd always believed every word my parents said, couldn't even look my way. By the next morning, the ripple effect was everywhere. My parents' social circle people who'd once lined up to attend their parties suddenly stopped calling. The family group chat went silent. Within a week, the HR department at my mom's country club reached out to her for an urgent meeting. Brad's boss called him in for a private discussion after seeing my accountant's report and the evidence I had sent. Brad was fired before the week ended. Then came the practical consequences. I officially froze all family accounts. Milavier. Miss Price sent formal letters to my parents and Brad, demanding repayment and immediate cessation of all attempts to access my funds. The Range Rover was repossessed within days. I ended the lease on my parents' penthouse and put the house on the market. By the end of the summer, my parents faced foreclosure, unable to keep up with payments without my support. Every step was clinical, calm, and fully documented. There were no threats. No screaming matches. Just boundaries and legal follow-through. For once, I was the one setting the terms and enforcing the rules. I expected anger, but what I got instead was a storm of apologies. My mom emailed me pages of regret, filled with promises to change. My dad sent long messages about misunderstandings and family tradition. Brad, who had never so much as said thank you, texted me twice, "Please, can we talk and don't do this?" Steph. I never responded. What surprised me most was how the story spread. My professional network started reaching out not with gossip, but with support. People who had known me only as the hard worker, the achiever, now saw the truth behind the silence. I posted my journey on LinkedIn. Not for revenge, but as a warning about boundaries. And it resonated. My story was picked up by a podcast, then a local news outlet. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't just about family, it was about every person who had ever been told that family comes first, no matter the cost. No one in my family could hide from the fallout. Their reputations were left in tatters. Old friends kept their distance. Colleagues lost respect. Even people I barely knew sent messages saying they admired my strength. The most powerful part, I never once raised my voice. I didn't argue. I stood my ground and let the truth, backed by evidence, speak for itself. I didn't get the apology I deserved. And I certainly didn't get my money back. But I finally got something worth more than all of that: my peace, my dignity, and the knowledge that I would never again be treated like an afterthought. When the dust finally settled, it was quiet, almost shockingly so. I found myself waking up to a world without the constant ping of family requests or the heavy cloud of obligation. For the first time in my adult life, my calendar was mine alone. I could breathe. I could finally hear my own thoughts. I moved out of Boston and into a new city, choosing a place because I loved it, not because it was close to anyone else. I threw myself into work. But this time, it was on my terms. My career soared. Not because I was running from something, but because I wanted to see what I could do when I wasn't carrying everyone else. My new circle wasn't defined by blood, but by kindness, respect, and laughter. People who cheered my wins, who didn't expect me to pay for their mistakes, who saw me as Stephanie, not as someone to be used. Over time, I built what I always needed: a chosen family. There were friends who'd sit with me for hours, listening without judgment. There were colleagues who toasted my achievements without a hint of jealousy. There was even a neighbor who brought me cookies when she learned it was my birthday. Just because these small acts meant more than any grand gesture ever could. It's strange, looking back, how the emptiness left by my old family was filled with something so much better. The lesson I learned, the one I hope you carry with you, is that boundaries are not just healthy, they're essential. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your peace. And you never have to keep sacrificing just to earn a place at someone else's table. I learned to celebrate my wins, big and small. I learned that I could give love, time, energy without expecting anything in return, and still feel whole. Most importantly, I learned that I was worthy of respect, whether my family gave it to me or not. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you're listening now and thinking of all the times you put yourself last, hoping for approval that never really came. If that's you, know this: you are not alone. You are not selfish for drawing a line. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what breaks you and build a new life that feels like home. So let me ask you, have you ever had to choose yourself? Even when it meant letting go of the people you thought would always be there. What did you lose and what did you gain? I hope you'll share your story in the comments, because these conversations matter. And if you want to hear more stories about standing up, setting boundaries, and finally finding peace, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for listening to my story. Here's to all of us who learn to stop surviving for others and start living for ourselves.